So before I bring Bev up, just a quick introduction for those that aren't familiar with her or her work at ITSMA. Bev's been long covering the ABM market. In fact, she was the first to coin this back in 2003, so she's well qualified to speak on the topic. And then she's been working on this ever since. And ABM wasn't always in vogue, and she's been covering this for the past 14, 15 years. So she's going to have a lot of experience and insights to provide us. Bev, in the past year, she wrote a book on ABM titled A Practitioner's Guide to ABM, Accelerating Growth for Strategic Accounts. So for those that are interested, it's available on Amazon, but if you're interested, let us know, and we have a discount code that we can offer you. So really looking forward to this next discussion. And with that, I'll bring up Bev to kick things off. Thanks, Bev.
Thank you, Brent. Hello, everyone. So as Brent said, I've been working in this field for about 15 years when it wasn't in vogue, and I guess that makes me either stupid or stubborn, or both, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's both. So really lovely to be here with you today. I just want to set the scene a little bit on the types of ABM that we see going on in the market, how people are approaching them, share some examples of best practice and the different types, give you an idea of the budgets that people are spending, and then, as Brent said, I'm happy to take any questions along with David. So, how can you accelerate your impact with ABM? That's the question. We think there are three types of ABM that we're seeing in the market today, but they're all trying to do the same thing, and that's treating individual accounts as markets of one. And I know people have talked about that already this morning. And there are four principles, so it doesn't really matter what type of ABM you're doing. If you're not sticking with these four principles, you're probably not doing ABM at all, actually. You're probably just doing really good marketing. So those principles are, first of all, it's in partnership with sales. And actually, it's probably in partnership with delivery, customer success, other parts of the organization as well today. It's about building reputation and relationships in the accounts that matter. It's not just about revenue. And I think that's been a bit of a shift for marketers who have been very pipeline and funnel and marketing qualified lead driven. And this is about a little bit more than that. This is about really trying to be more client focused, customer focused in everything you do. It's about tailoring your campaigns. So whether that's a little bit of personalization, a kind of 20% personalization, or whether it's a completely bespoke, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's about building everything around insight, including your intent-driven data. So three types of ABM, one-to-one, and this is literally where you say, right, okay, Thomson Reuters, massive company, I'm going to actually build a marketing plan just for that account. And it's usually, you're spending £25,000 upwards. You've got somebody spending at least 1 day a week just on that account. They are part of the account team. Usually there is a sales organization that includes account managers, and you're part of that account manager's team. Is anybody doing that today? Okay, one person. All right, that's interesting, because that's where ABM started, actually, in that category. Then came along ABM light or one-to-few marketing, ABM, and that's where people said, wow, this is really powerful. Can you do more accounts for us, please? But by the way, we can't give you any more money and we can't give you any more people. So if you can, and anyone familiar with that approach to marketing? Yeah, okay, everybody. So this is where people said, okay, we need to cover more accounts, but we need to be still using these principles of ABM and spend a little bit less on each account. And it could be that here you're starting to try and get into new accounts. So here you tend to have a cluster of accounts with a similar issue. They might be in the same industry. There might be retail companies, for example, that are desperately trying to get their clicks to bricks or whatever it might be. And they're kind of lagging behind on that. And so you build a campaign just for those 10 companies. So the top one might be Tesco. ABM Lite, you might have a cluster of companies that are high street retailers that haven't quite got their online strategy together yet. And then you're spending about 25K on a cluster of 5 to 10 accounts, and it might be that a marketer is looking after perhaps 5 clusters, a full-time ABM marketer, if they're doing ABM Lite. Then the new kid on the block, and this is what's really been enabled by technology, is programmatic ABM, or one-to-many, as it's sometimes called. And this is where you are using technology to literally say, okay, all the retailers in Europe, we could be doing business with, but actually we only care about these 300. And so we're going to be very, very, very targeted to these 300 retailers and send them specific content based on what they're looking for, based on what we know that they care about. But it's going to be very tailored campaigns just for them and tailored content. And here, really, the biggest investment is in the technology. And once the technology is in, then you've got the platform to do this. So who's doing one to few, ABM Lite today? Okay, so that's about a third of the room. Who's doing one to many, the programmatic approach? Okay, who's doing none? Okay, so everyone's doing something. Who's doing more than one type? Okay, that's interesting. So what we're seeing is people started off just doing one, and if their clients were massive, where they could potentially be getting millions of revenue from one account each year, they tended to start at the top of this triangle with strategic ABM. If your deal size is quite small, and you're trying to reach more companies, and it's more of a transactional sale, often people are starting at the bottom of that triangle. But what's happening now is a blending. So people are actually using more than one type and blending the different types to fit in with the sales organization and what it's doing. So how do you use insight is the question. In this situation, I think there's a couple of ways that you can use it to really improve what you're doing. First of all is deciding which accounts matter. Yeah? So the first bit of insight is to say, how am I going to decide which accounts I should be doing a one-to-one approach to, which accounts I should be doing maybe a one-to-few or a one-to-many approach to. And intent data is part of this, because I'm sure you're all familiar with the way that you're scoring potential accounts, yeah? Everyone using kind of intent data to score? Yeah. So you might be saying, yes, they're in the right industry, they're the right size accounts, the salespeople care about them, but which of them is in market right now for the kinds of solutions that we're looking for? And those are the ones that are attractive to you. So they might score very highly on this horizontal axis, they might be over on the right-hand side. What you also need to think about is, well, where are we potentially strong competitively in those accounts? So where have we got a good fit for the industry, a good track record, some IPR perhaps that makes us relevant, good relationships already? Where do we score pretty well on that vertical axis as well? And the accounts that are top right, so maybe they're big, they're interested in what you sell, they're looking at the moment, they're in market, you have a good potential competitive strength there, they're going to be top right. You might want to do one-to-one type of ABM for those accounts. The ones that sort of fit in these boxes here, so they're pretty attractive, you're pretty strong, you might be doing a one-to-many approach. And everybody else, either it's general marketing, it's industry marketing, or it's one-to-many. So there's a few tens or hundreds of accounts that you care about, but not enough to invest right up here, but they're still important, and they might move up there. So one way of using insight and using your intent data is to sit with sales and say, okay, where are all the accounts that are in our universe? Where do they fit on this kind of prioritization matrix? Does that make sense to anyone doing that today? No? Okay, that's interesting. So maybe we'll talk about that in the Q&A. So that's the first thing. The second way of using insight and intent data is actually in the campaigns that you build. If you remember, to do ABM, it has to be built on customer insight. Otherwise, it's kind of the traditional inside-out kind of approach to marketing. So I'm going to share with you 3 examples. This one is from Fujitsu, and this is in the one-to-one, the strategic ABM bracket. And this is where Fujitsu was in a huge organization, DHL, but only in one country and only in one part of the business. So the classic thing where you're only selling one thing when you could be selling your whole portfolio. And they said, this account is so important to us, it's worth us building a marketing plan just for this one account. And they went in, they did some analysis on what the account was facing in its industry. They looked at the stakeholders and the individuals that mattered to them, the countries where they could potentially be playing with this account. And they realized actually they were the newbies in the account. There were some strong incumbents. So their whole kind of messaging framework was around fresh thinking for the account. They got some champions in a room with some new stakeholders and literally did a very old-fashioned rollout mat and said, we think these are the issues that matter to you based on the insight that they'd put together. And of course, those execs were then able to say, well, these 3 things are the ones that matter. How can you help us with these 3 things? And from there, a whole kind of thought leadership, capabilities, demo, experience, what do you call them, briefing centers, one of those types of experiences was put together around those 3 things that mattered most. Yeah? And the upshot of this story, you can read more about this story on ITSMA.com if you want to. The upshot was that they ended up in 6 countries. They had a multi-million-pound revenue from this account and a larger pipeline, all within 1 year. So insight-driven one-to-one ABM. Second example is SAP, and they were doing one-to-few. They said, okay, there are a bunch of industries and there are a bunch of accounts that matter to us around the world. We're going to find out which industries matter the most. So they did some insight internally around the sales organizations around the world and said, which industries are you focusing on in the coming year? They then researched those industries and the accounts that mattered most in each territory. And they said, okay, these are the accounts that matter, about 40 accounts across 6 industries. And these are the issues facing those accounts. And they then looked for the stakeholders in those accounts as well. And as you can imagine, they're then tracking those stakeholders to see if there's any kind of intent revealed as to what they're looking for. Perhaps they're looking at other potential suppliers, so it's a warning of a competitive sort of pitch going into those accounts. And they built a whole set of assets around the issues facing those stakeholders in each account, in each industry, that the sales team could use locally. So globally built assets. The sales team can literally watch when one of their accounts is interested in a particular issue and then serve them up the assets, both digitally and face-to-face through meetings, briefing centers, and so on. So again, SAP, very slick organization, huge pipeline built through this approach, and quite an efficient way of doing it, a global tool set created, global technology given out to the sales and local marketing field marketers who could then decide when it's best to use which assets with which stakeholder in which account. Third example is Adobe. And this is a one-to-many example. And this is such a simple example, really. It's all technology that we either have or perhaps could have if you don't already. And this is where they said, we've got a particular content asset that links to something we're trying to sell. But we've noticed that people aren't really interacting with it. They're not engaging with it. And actually, we think it's pretty good, but for some reason, they're not engaging with it. And the reason was it wasn't tailored to the industries and the companies that mattered. So all they did, very simply, was change the way that people saw the content asset when they landed on Adobe's website. So they recognized who was coming to the website, and they served them up the same content, but with different wrapping. It's almost how you're packaging the content to increase the engagement and make them more likely to want to talk to you and take it further. So if you're coming from Zappos, you see a certain look and feel. If you're in NBC Universal, you see more of a media type feel. Starwood sees more of a hotel and leisure sort of facility image. And Audi sees an automotive image. And actually, in SAP, they also did tailoring to this extent. But within the automotive cluster, they changed the colors on the video, just for €1,000, I think it was, so that it represented the brand that was coming to their website. And what they're talking about now is a no-click personalization. So you recognize who is coming, and you don't even need to click to get targeted information. You just get almost the old microsite sort of experience, but you don't actually have to do it. You don't have to build it. It's all done automatically. And I think that's quite an exciting thing for us as ABMers. And you can see the increased white paper downloads there that obviously then increase the scoring of people to become sales accepted leads for Adobe. So very successful, 3 stories. The kind of ROI you can expect from these 3 types, 87% of marketers say that ABM in general gives you a better ROI than any other marketing approach. So if you're not a convert yet, you should probably be thinking about this seriously. When you're doing one-to-one, the strategic ABM, it's 91%, and one-to-few, 91%. If you're doing one-to-many, it's slightly less. It's 76% saying it's more, it delivers a better ROI than any other type of marketing. But still, we'll take 76%, wouldn't we? We'd say, yeah, okay, that's convincing enough for us to do one-to-many. And not only that, I mean, we've been talking about being customer-focused for years. I'm sure you've all had initiatives saying we're going to be client-focused, the customer is the thing that matters most, we're going to hide all our complexity in our organization and just make it simple and easy to do business with us. Almost nobody manages that. So if you have, you're sitting on absolute gold dust. But what I love about ABM is it's starting to pull that whole thing together. So it's starting to say, yes, we're taking a single view of that particular account and the stakeholders, and we're marshalling the troops behind us so that we're just showing them the most important thing to them, not what we're trying to sell on the truck. And I think that is really exciting. You can see here, ABM is playing a major role in making our company more customer-centric. So finally, we might actually start achieving what we've set out to do years and years ago. Okay, that's all I want to say to set up the panel. So hand back to you, Brent, and take some questions.
Super. Thanks, guys. So we want to invite David England up. I mentioned this earlier. David's the EMEA Marketing Director at Dell EMC for their Cloud Client Computing Division. So thanks for being with us, David. I think it would be good to get a vendor's perspective on this. So could you talk a little bit about what you're doing as it relates to your ABM strategy and any successes or even speed bumps along the way?
Okay, certainly. Good morning. I lead the marketing for a specialist division within Dell EMC across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. As you imagine, Dell EMC has a lot of customers. We're looking primarily at the large ones, so in enterprise and mid-market. We have a specialist sales team. We want those sales teams to be out there focused on the bigger accounts, and so we need to find a way of taking as much noise out of the system for the sales guys and providing them with real quality leads, however you define them, to go and follow up on. So the approach that we've taken is with Priority Engine, using Priority Engine to then do a map between the aligned accounts for the sales guys and who is actively researching. And really, when we started this, we had no idea what numbers we would get. So we ran the first report: are we going to be deluged with accounts, or is there going to be nobody in the report? But actually,
There's a few people.
there was a good number, and it got us off. And interestingly, on an ongoing basis, because the Priority Engine refreshes every week, and so we're getting for an individual salesperson probably 2 to 3 new accounts a month, which for a solution sale is ideal. You don't want any more than that. They can't focus on any more than that. Yeah. And the other thing that was really interesting is because the whole marketing to sales handover it's been a challenge my whole career. We've still not fixed it. But here we actually, because the numbers we were dealing with weren't huge, so I had my team sit down one-to-one with the salespeople and go through the list of leads that came out of the Priority Engine reports, and say, so what about this one? And what we found is they were already engaged with about 50% of the accounts, which is reassuring, because if they weren't engaged with anybody that was researching, I'd be very worried about what they were doing. It meant that we effectively had a net new accounts for them to go after, about 50% of the accounts. So what it achieved was the highest level of engagement and enthusiasm with our sales team that I've seen for any digital approach.
And I'd like to add on to that. So like, in creating this strategy, how closely did you work with sales to develop the list? And then, I mean, you just touched on it briefly, but how has this helped build the partnership between sales and marketing? I mean, you mentioned weekly sit-downs, but I would imagine that, this has really helped overall with the partnership to establish new contacts within these accounts.
Absolutely, but it was one of those things where you couldn't sit down and tell them the strategy. Because marketing's off on another thing. They're doing another new thing. We have very low expectations as to what's going to come out of this. So the first time we really sat down with them was, hey, look what we've got. Are you working with any of these accounts? Are any of these accounts new to them? Because we know they are researching our solution area. And so we use the systems. So Dell EMC has ways of categorizing customers. We use the company's categorization in order to find the accounts that we knew our salespeople would care about, and then we uploaded those accounts. The speed bumps, matching data. Talk to Vula. Yeah, matching data. It's a big speed bump, but anyway, we got there. Okay. So as a result, we were getting back. We didn't go to sales and say, give us an account list, because that is generally an unsatisfactory process. You either get
for marketing.
for marketing, because we have a really, really varied skill set across our sales team.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that anything to add on that? Is like creating an effective, named account list?
Yeah, I think this is a really common issue, actually. And as you say, I know a lot of ABMers that say, well, I've been given the list from sales. And the worst thing they can do if they're introducing ABM as an initiative is say, well, I'm just going to take this list and go with this list without doing any more work on it. Because what you might find is it's somebody's mate, it's someone that they sold to 10 years ago. There's reasons why they've chosen those companies. And ABM might not work. And if they're not ready to buy, if you don't do your analysis up front, and ABM doesn't work, it's very difficult to then reintroduce ABM, because they do say, oh, here we go again with the old ABM stuff, or here's another initiative, look out, marketing's coming, duck, So I think what the best thing you can do, and in my experience, sitting down with sales, with business unit directors, and doing that analysis of, well, okay, what's going to be attractive to us? What shape of customer do we want? And where are we potentially going to be the most successful? And just saying what those factors are and doing some analysis around those factors, and then coming back and sharing your results and discussing them in a workshop or something like that, so that everyone gets bought into who's on the list. And there's one list. There isn't a sales list, an account management list, and a marketing list. It's one list.
Great.
Yeah.
And if there's questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll have a microphone passed around. I have a few more, but we want to open this up so you all can ask David and Bev. I know we're talking about ABM, but how important are targeting white space accounts beyond your named account list, and is there a different follow-up process as it relates to those?
I think I kind of have the feeling that targeting white space is a bit of an oxymoron. It's kind of they're not on our target list, so. What do we do with them? So that we tend to put into our demand detection. So we do two things. We do ABM for the accounts that we know the salespeople will care about, and we do demand detection for the rest of the market. Mm-hmm. And so with demand detection, we would take the whitelist. I guess the area that I spend most of my time looking at the moment is digital nurturing, and because that's what we need to do. We need to, if people are spending up to 60-70% of their time doing research before they engage with a vendor, we need to digitally nurture them through that process, and ultimately get them to put their hand up and say, you know what, I'm really interested in your stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the holy grail. Because we can't get there a lot of the time, maybe we use telemarketing or whatever else, but try to avoid that, because I want people to say, I'm interested.
Yeah. When so Bev, is there a right or wrong number when you're creating an ABM list for the one to many? are one to few? I mean, one-to-one's pretty simple, but.
One-to-one's pretty easy, yeah. And usually there's about 25 accounts in a one-to-one program. So just to give you an idea, that's an average. Obviously, no one is average, but it gives you a feeling. Clusters tend to have 5 to 10 accounts, and often there's up to 100 in a cluster-based, or sometimes 200. And you really get big numbers in North America in a one-to-many. So our colleagues in North America tend to put, a couple of thousand on their one-to-many list. Whereas I haven't seen that over here in Europe as much. I've seen people just having general marketing and demand gen, or having one-to-one and one-to-few. So this one-to-many approach is relatively new here in Europe still. If you work for an American company, you're probably further ahead, actually, because the thinking is further ahead there. And there it can be, a couple of thousand. I don't know how. What about you?
We're really interested in looking at taking an American data set and applying it to EMEA. So we had a kind of top 3,000 account list, sort of the big accounts globally. That top 3,000 was something like 30,000 by the time we got it to EMEA, because every bank has how many different offices around Europe. So suddenly what looked like a manageable enterprise account list was in
Scary.
thousands. So we've been dealing in many thousands of account names. But from that, sifting out the ones that are valuable to sales.
Yeah, and I think the other thing David and I were talking about before we came in up here was how you organise internally. If you're in a big company, you've got multiple sales teams, multiple units, how you get those aligned. So you've got 2 countries all both thinking they're going to do HSBC, for example, but then you've got 5 units in your company all wanting to sell to HSBC as well. I mean, that's an internal coordination issue, isn't it?
And Dell and now Dell EMC has got a very clear approach. Is one person fronts the company, or in a really big account it'd be a team, but one person fronts it. They're the account executive. And so we need to, if we want to go and take our solution, or we know that company is researching our area, our first call is to the account executive to say, hey, did you know your customers researching our stuff? Can we go in together? So, but it changes the engagement of the customer hugely to have one person fronts it, rather than, because. And anybody that's watched the Dell EMC acquisition progress, we could have 20 or 30 different sales teams trying to approach a customer.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Bev, let's say you've established 2,000 accounts on your list. I mean, when you're working with clients, how often do you recommend that they revise that or look at it?
That's a really good question, actually. As I said, we tend to do, what I spend my time doing a lot now, is helping people plan their overall ABM program. So how many one-to-ones, how many one-to-fews, how many one-to-manys, how do we organise globally, locally, all that sort of stuff, budgeting, everything. And when do we let people swap accounts in and out of the program? Really good question. The best example I've ever seen, and I'm not really a football fan, but it's the transfer window. Any football fans in the audience? Yeah, so you'll understand this better than me. But basically, there was one company that was struggling with accounts flip-flopping in and out. And if you're the client, you suddenly get this really customized stuff and you think, that's really relevant to me. And then suddenly it goes away and you think, what's happened there? So you've got to be really careful how you kind of particularly get people out of an ABM program. Say they're in a merger or something and you can't deal with them for a while. Whatever it is, you still need to have some kind of continuity, and marketing's really good for that, even if sales have gone somewhere else. This particular company said, you can swap companies in and out of the account-based marketing program once a year. We can't have hundreds of companies coming in unless you take companies going out as well, because we can only cope with so many. Yeah. So they had the transfer window. I mean, once a year may not be right for you, but it worked for them. And once a year, the salespeople had to justify why an account needed to come in or go out of the program.
Great. And I think we have a minute or two left. So for those, I saw with a show of hands, there's a lot of people that are just starting their journey with ABM.
Yeah.
I mean, what are some practical tips to get people from step 1 to step 2 to step 3?
Okay, so first thing is look at how your sales are organized. So is it a geographical sales force, an industry sales force? Do you have account managers? Are there account plans? And what's your deal size? So how much do you typically get out of clients in a year? How much could you get out of them? Because that will tell you, is it one-to-one that I should be doing, one-to-few, one-to-many, or a combination of all three? That's the first thing to look at, really. And then I would recommend you do a pilot and just see, proof of concept, effectively, see if it works for you. Because you'll need to invest in technology, you'll need to hire people or change the jobs that they're doing if they're doing industry marketing today and you want them to do more ABM. So I would take it fairly steady and do the proof of concept approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And David, from your experience, any?
Yeah, I think it's about. I'd say start with where are the pain points in the current way that marketing and sales are working together. My whole career has been spent in the sales and marketing organisation. But there are marketers who've never really had that experience of what makes a salesperson get up in the morning, what do they care about. Look at where the pain points are, and if one of the pain points is you can't get your leads followed up, kind of go and ask the questions. Why aren't you following up the leads? And it's, well, I'm too busy. I'm doing something else. So ultimately, they don't care about it. So that's a great opportunity to use ABM to give them leads that they care about. And find the pain points and see if ABM can address it.
And how often are you all meeting with the sales leaders in your division to go through what you're delivering?
So my team are meeting. Well, they have regular one-on-ones with the. So I've got 3 field-based central people, but I've got 3 people looking out into the field, working with 20 outside sales specialists. Okay. So that's a reasonable number. So every couple of weeks they're having a one-to-one with each salesperson.
With all 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and they're covering all sorts of things. So what we're able to do is just feed the ABM leads into this and say, hey, look, I've got 2 new ones for you. Are these any good? And the thing that we decided right up front is is when will we put them into the CRM system? And so we only put them into the CRM system when sales said, yeah, that's a new one for me. Mm-hmm. So we're not loading existing customers in. And we're also using we have a concept of inbound and outbound leads. So inbound leads have an SLA because somebody has said, I want you to talk to me, so you've got to get back to them quickly. Outbound leads, we load in on a quarterly basis and say, these are accounts that you need to go outbound to get to. And so the ABM leads we load for outbound and then give them the time to schedule their time as to when they're going to work through and get to them.
Great. Well, we're a bit over time, so thanks Bev, thanks David for a lot of practical advice. We appreciate you sharing it with us today. Thank you.
Welcome.